Hey guys, in this part 3 of the tutorial, we're quickly going to create some corner pieces and valves. And the valves I'm going to create using multi-parameters, so we can actually have more stuff on the pipes without stuff moving. So without further ado, let's just dive into Houdini and continue where we left off. The first thing that I'm going to do though is we had this work mode created, but it's actually not doing anything for us inside here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a bypassing node. So I know that this pipe, it's everything I need to be able to see what I'm creating. So I'm going to create a switch node, and I'm going to place that right before the normal. And then from this position, I'm going to be able to switch. I'm going to hit Shift R, so I have my left is my pipe, and then using this parameter I can switch between 0 and 1, and that will output either all the things that I created before or just the pipe. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to take this work mode, I'm going to copy the parameter, go back into the switch node, and I'm just going to paste a relative reference. Go to my out node to view. And now when I switch between work mode, it switches. However, you can see that currently it's set wrong. So now when it's work mode, it should display less. So I'm going to hit Shift R again, just to make sure that our second input, or our 1, because I already started 0, our 1 is linked to the pipe. And then when it's not toggled on, we have the extra information here from our flanges and from our size and all that kind of stuff. Right, so let's dive into the creation of the corner pieces. So before, when we had our flanges, they were created based on this poly bevel that we had here, and then using our group range we deleted certain parts. And we're actually going to need this later on again as well. I'm quickly going to start creating the same poly bevel as we have here, but this time I actually want to have different divisions. And I'm just going to copy this one using our Alt drag. It'll be linked up. And in here in the poly bevel, I'm going to set it to round because we had our previous corners to be round as well. And then the divisions that I want to have is the amount of divisions that we have. So we have this nice round shape from before. And that should still work. So if we go back to our pipe generator, we have our corner divisions. If we lower that settings for say 4, I go back into our flanges, you should see that it also works here. Now, next thing, I'm going to place another carve node. We make sure everything is set from 0 to 1, so we have a nice line going on. And then inside the carve, I'm going to set the breakpoints to cut all internal U breakpoints. Then from there, I'm going to create a group range again. And if I select this one, I'm going to call this straight. And if I select one out of multiples, you can see that we get a certain number. But this number here should be based on the previous divisions that we have. So we have our divisions coming from our parameter interface, but if I do that, I'm short on 1. So we're going to do our divisions, and we're just going to add 1. And that's going to give us all the straight pieces. So now when we, if I go out into our pipe generator and I go to the parameters, if we now increase our divisions here, you can see that the groups still stay the same, which is really nice and convenient for us. Alright, so from there, I'm just going to quickly place a fuse. Make sure that all the points are properly connected. But first, I'm going to blast the parts that we don't need. So right now, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say straight, because that's what our group was. And then we have our nice corner pieces. So I want the actual corner pieces. We're going to fuse them. And then after the fuse, I'm going to place a polypath. And basically what this does, is I'm going to show you by turning it off after our sweep. What it's doing is it's connecting all these points together, so when we sweep later on, we actually get a nice round shape. So right now I'm turning it off so you see the results without it. And then from there on, I'm going to create a null node. And I know that this is going to be called my corner segments. So I actually have my corner pieces here. I'm just going to call it corner segments. And then from that position on, I'm going to use a sweep. The question is, what are we going to sweep? Well, we wanted to have a similar corner piece as you see in normal piping, and that usually is twist-on pieces of pipe. So our backbone we already have right now, but we still need our cross section. And our cross section is actually going to be pretty simple. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a circle again. This circle I basically want to have the same size as we had before with our actual pipe. So our radius is again based on the pipe diameter. So I'm going to go again to my parameters. And I can see I have my diameter here. Copy this parameter, paste it here. Copy this one, paste it there. And right now it's going to be incredibly big. As you can see, it's 15. So we have to multiply this by 0.05. And that gives us a nice diameter that we wanted. But in the case of our corner pieces, we actually want them to be slightly bigger. So instead of 0.05 for now, I'm just gonna increase the size a little bit. So I'm gonna watch what we have here, and then I actually want this to be slightly bigger. So let's say we get 6, and we get a nice extra shape. And then for our divisions, of course, we want the same divisions here. So I'm going to say my polygon needs same amount of division as we had before. All right. And then when I have this in our sweep, our corner segments, it's still a little bit too big. We have these nice corner pieces. And then in our sweep, I'm going to set the angle fix and the fix clipping on. Here I'm going to change the polypath so we get a nice one view. And then here I'm going to say skin unclosed. And we get our nice pipes. And as you can see, I still need to reverse because we now have our back face on the inside. And now we have it nicely on the outside. Alright. So if I were to view this one, and I'm going out to my pipe generator, and I'm going all the way out, you can see we have these thicker outer parts, but the connection here still is not really as decent as we want. So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to dive back in, our flanges. In here we have our initial pipes. I'm going to make a second setup. I'm going to grab my poly bevel again. On this part, what we actually want is we want to have all the straight lines. So basically the other parts that we have. So from this blast, I can just copy this one, our same list here. And then instead of having this delete selected on, we want to say delete non-selected. So we have this. And then I'm going to create another null node. I'm going to call this our mid segments, because that's basically what they are. So mid segments. And then the next thing that I'm gonna do is I actually want all these corner pieces on the corners and not on the end parts. I'm later gonna create some end caps here just for, you know, like cleaning it up. But right now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create another blast, and basically what I want is I want to select the first and last point. Well, the first point we know, that's gonna be our 0 point. But the last point, that can change, because we can change the amount of points that are in here, and if we make our pipe longer with multiple corners, it all changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a small piece in, small part in here. I'm going to say 0 is my first one, and then I'm going to use a backtick. I'm going to write number of points, and then I'm just going to create a reference to the null node we just created. So that's our mid segments right there, closing brackets, and then I'm going to do -1. 0, I will have the point which will be the last point, supposedly blasting those, going over the points. Then we see we have one here, that's our point. And then eventually these ones should be deleted as well. I forgot to place a polyframe, so I'm going to place the polyframe right here before the mid segments. And of course, I'm going to set the tangent name normal. See, I made a mistake. So instead of mid segments, I actually typed in corner segments. Silly me. Sorry about that. So let's delete this part. Now we should have mid segments in there. And then our -1, and then we have our points. All right, so now we can actually create another piece of geometry, and we're going to do that again using a circle and a poly extrude. So I'm going to create a circle. Actually, I'm just going to hit escape right now, and I'm going to create the original circle that we had here. Again, I'm just dragging this in there. That way I know that at least here we'll have the right size and the right divisions and all that stuff. But again, I want this one to be slightly bigger yet. So I'm going to just say, put a 6.5 here. So if we look at our original circle, we can see we have a slightly bigger size right now. All right, we have our reverse, so it's looking the right way. I'm going to place a poly extrude, because we actually want some thickness. And then in the poly extrude, I'm just going to go by the circle's radius that we had before. So we have our radius, and I'm just going to copy this specific radius. We have our x and our y. I'm just going to copy parameter. I'm going to go in our poly extrude distance, and then paste my relative reference. So now when our circle would become bigger, our extrude will be further as well, and they will be going in a similar direction. Then I'm going to bevel the edges real quick. So I'm going to place a poly bevel, and if I have my distance here, you can see that a lot of stuff is going on, and I want to ignore my flat edges. And then the angle I'm going to change to such a way that only the 90 corner edges actually work. I'm just going to set it to 80 for now. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to set it to round. So we have our nice edge here. In our poly extrude, don't forget to output the back as well. And let's play a little bit around with these settings. And there we go. Now all I have to do is basically copy the points. And since we already created our points here, the specific ones that we need, we can target points to copy to. This one in here. If I view what we're doing, you can see those get placed here. Poly extrude. I'm going to decline this a little bit, so I'm going to divide it in half. And then if we merge the sweep and the copy points together, we get our nice corner pieces. Turn off my points. And you see we have a small error going on here, and that has to do with the placement of the circle. Right, so originally when we created our circle, it's on 0, and then when we use our poly extrude, it's only extruding in one direction. So I'm going to place a transform, place that after the poly extrude, and then I'm just going to grab the distance from our poly extrude, copy the parameter, and then we can see in our XYZ it needs to go in negative Z, so XYZ, place relative. And then when I watch this one, negate this, you see we go all the way back, but we don't want to go full back. We want to divide that by 0.5, and then we'll always be in the middle. So when we have more distance in our poly extrude, we also get a further transform back. If we look at our merge, everything looks splendid. And then now all we have to do here is, for now, I'm going to place a quick switch node. And if I place that in here, I hook this up like this, I press A, drag down so it goes down a little bit. I have my output. Now I can switch between flanges and corner pieces. Okay. So if we have our pipe generator right now, looks completely different from what we had before. Alright, so that's it for the corners. So as before, when we created the other pipe with UVs, I also want to check the UVs of the rest. So what I can do right now is I'm going to hit UV quick shade, and if I plug this one in and I view it, you see that we have nice UVs on our pipes, but we don't have them on our corners yet. So I'm going to delete this one again. I'm going to dive in. After our output node here, I'm going to place our UV quick shade node as well, so we can actually see what we're doing. So we see we have some pretty weird looking UVs going on here, which is not really what we want. And we know we have two different parts. So the first part here is our circle and our poly bevel. And I can actually pretty easily create UVs on those. Just create UV project. And I place that under this one. And then instead of our basic UV project that we have, I'm going to change it to cylindrical. And I'm going to rotate it, see if I get a nice view somewhere. Okay, 90 degrees looks about fine for this part. Am I correct? And then from here, our U and our V range, we can change those sizes to match. One smaller UVs, you can see I can go real small. We get real small numbers here. And for these parts, it doesn't really matter too much what UVs we have right now, because you don't really see those in our final tool anyways, because we have our connecting pipes here. So I'm not going to be worried too much about this. I'm just going to be worried about the outer parts. But for now, I think these UVs here, this size is pretty decent for what we need. Right, so I don't have to worry about those parts. However, if I look at our quick shade, you can see we don't have any UVs on this part here. We're going to create that using UV texture. So first I'm going to use a convert node. I'm going to hook that one up. And as you can see, I have to do that in the right place, of course. I'm going to do that right after the sweep. So we have our lines here, or our pipes here, that are converted to NURBS with our U order and V order from 2, and I'm interpolating through the holes. Then I'm getting a UV texture, and I'm going to set that to rows and columns. In our rows and columns, I actually want to scale this eventually as well. Right now, I'm going to not worry about the scaling too much. I'm going to go over that a little bit later, so we can actually change the size of our UVs for our entire pipes in one go. And then from this UV edit, I'm gonna convert it back again. So I'm gonna hit convert again. I'm gonna place that in between. And then in our convert node, I'm gonna set interpolate through holes again. It's down here. And I'm gonna convert to polygons. Oh, I see I forgot our UV edit, so I'm gonna hit UV edit, and I'm gonna place that right in between. As you can see, we now have our nice UVs aligned here. So basically what that does is we convert to NURBs, because NURBs have U and Vs, so UVs basically. And then in our texture, we set it to rows and columns, what we want in this row and column. And then in our UV edit, we basically say that we use this attribute. And then we convert it back to the original polygons that we had, so we can use it in Engine. Right, so that brings us to the end of our corners. I go out, and if I look at this thing in one go, place that UV quick shade again, you can see we now have our UVs and everything looks decent. So now when we apply a material, it will look fine. And as you can see, we apply the materials afterwards. Alright, so from here let's focus on not the pipe and the flanges, but we're going to create a quick valve so we have something to look at. I'm going to create another subnet. And again, we have our curve that goes in. And I'm going to color this one green again. And I'm going to call this valve. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically first create some geometry that is going to be our valve, and then later using a multi-parm, we're going to create valves in our for loop, or we're going to create a for loop and we're going to create the valves using that for loop. So we have our input curve, which I'm quickly going to color blue. And then again, we'll create an output node, which I'll call out valve. So we have our valve. Change the shape and color. First, I'm going to select it. All right. So this is our original line. Right. So I'm going to create. I'm just quickly going to create our valve based on the parameters we already have. Alright, and from here on is basically your modeling. So I'm just going to quickly create this and you don't really have to watch me do it. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Alright, so I've created the valve geometry, and basically what I did is I just created some circles, and a torus, and a tube, and that is the general shape of my valve. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place that on the actual curve. I'm going to grab our valve geometry, I'm going to hit copy the points. And we have our in and our out. And right now at every single point one gets copied, and that's not really what we want. So in our copy the points, we're just going to set the target point to 0, and that's going to give us our first point. Bear with me because I'm going to try to work around this a little bit. I haven't really tested this too much, but the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to, after my input curve, I'm going to create, I'm just going to create a null. So I know this is my input curve. I'm just gonna call this in curve, and then underneath here I am going to place a carve node, and with this carve node, with our U, I can now actually place it somewhere along our line. But I don't want it to be able to go into the corner pieces where we already created all our corner stuff. So I'm going to create another polybevel, and in this polybevel, again with our distance, points, we can actually have those corner pieces. To make sure I have the same thing, I'm just going to copy it from our original pipe. It's here. Dive back in and place this. I'm going to update these. In our divisions as well. And I'm just going to place this after our carve node. So now we have our corner pieces. And for here, we don't need it round, we just need the straight pieces because I don't want to have it on there. And I'm going to do the same thing as we did before. I'm going to place a carve. It's going to allow me to set the complete line as one line. Then after our carve node, I'm going to use a convert line again. And in our convert line, we compute the rest length. Then from there, I'm going to create a group range again. Group by range. And I'm just going to call this corners. And again, we do the same thing we did before. We're just going to blast those corner parts. Because I don't actually want our stuff to be copied on there. So we blast those pieces out. And then from there, I'm going to place a poly frame. And in the poly frame, I'm going to use the tangent name to be our normal. And what this does is gives us the direction of where we want our valves to be placed. So now with a single carve node, I can actually decide where to get placed. Right, I'm going to set this one basically to 0.1. So we have our nice starting position. And now when we look at our out position, we look at our pipe generator, we actually have a valve starting to look like something. And if I go under here, I type UV quick shade, we look at that, we see that everything has UVs. In our UV texture, I'm going to just multiply this 2, and then when we go out, it's pretty much all the same size, which is neat. But we said we wanted to create multi-parms and have multiple of these, and we're going to do that in a for loop. So we're going to dive into our valve, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to start with our for loop. So we're going to place a for loop, and we want to have the one with feedback. Alright, well, to be able to access all our stuff that we're doing, we need to have everything in there. So after the input curve, so for our carve one, I'm going to place this one. Then our repeat end, I'm going to place after the copy the points. And then in here, we want our input. So we actually get that in there, and I want to have this meta node, so we have our iterations, all the stuff that we need. In our repeat end, we're gonna change the feedback each iteration to merge each iteration. So we actually want to have multiple iterations. And then in our iterations, that's actually where we need to change stuff based on our multi-parm. So we're going to go into the type properties, and in our parameters we have a lot of different menus that we can have. And for now I'm just going to create 2 folders, and one is going to be called, placed after the root, it's going to be called valves, which is a simple for now. Apply, and then in that valves I'm going to create another one, and I'm going to call this amount, and that's going to be our multi-parm block, and that's going to be called amount. Set our default to 1, and then in this amount I actually want to use our carve node that we had before, so our U, and the way we're using that is by typing a long string of text so that we can see it, and I want to have that based on a parameter that I create, and the parameter is in this case just going to be let's just go for an integer. I'm placing the integer here. We're going to call this one translate along curve, and I'm going to close it off so we can have different numbers. I'm going to call this position on pipe, and I'm going to set the range from 0 to 100. So we have our full line that we can use. Then from there on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in this U attribute, I'm actually going to change this. So I'm going to create, I'm going to hit apply, so it actually gets generated. And then I'm going to find that parameter. So I'm going to go in here, bracket, and then open it up, open it up again, and then last time, and we should be able to find our just quickly check. Okay, so it's just once. So we now have our amount, and when I hit 1, it should be our default value. So I'm quickly going to change that in our amount. We have our default set to 1. We now have our position on pipe. So I can actually copy this parameter and paste it in there. So we have our initial input, our position on pipe. So we have our U and our V curves. But then what I want is, because we're using a multiparm, I actually want to be able to access the different iteration. So I'm going to add the detail. And I'm going to add the detail of our the metadata node that we just created. So I'm going to bracket again, detail, and then find for our, or look for our metadata. That's our repeat, which is this one. Metadata 1. And then what we want from there is the iteration. And then I'm going to close it off. I'm going to add one because of our multiparm. And that should allow us to use our parameter to change this value and have that updated in there as well, based on the iteration that we have. And then in our metadata, we should actually find the iteration that we got from our amount. So I'm just gonna copy this parameter, and then in our iterations, say paste a relative reference. So that's going to give us our channel and our amount. And then it should take only our first iteration, and then it should in our carve. I'm getting an error, so I think I made a typo somewhere. Okay, I think it has something to do with this one. So in our type properties, in our translate along curve, we closed off the name of our channel or the name of our parameter with a pound, and that pound will take in the amount from our multiparm. So when we up the amount, if we set it to 1, to 2, to 3, to 4, whatever, the position on the pipe or the translate along curve pound, the pound will change to whatever number or iteration we have. So if I change that, if I delete this one, it will take the original name. So that's actually what we needed to change. So in our position on our pipe, we have it set from 0 to 100 to give us 100%. But in our U here, we only have the possibility to scale between 0 and 1. So we need to divide this number by 100. So I'm going all the way to the back, and then multiply this number . So now when we scale up, we can see we can go all the way to 100. And then when we look at our output, did I make a mistake in our copy the points? 0 is not a valid group, but it should be. Zero is not a valid group because we didn't have a point there before. Alright, so this is not allowed to go over 100. So let's change that as well. Let's go into our type properties, our actual tool, and then in our position on pipe, let's set this one to 99, and this one from 1. Hit apply, accept, and now we can actually create multiple valves without interfering with each other. So if we go out, we have our valves here. And I'm going to delete this quick shade, and that basically concludes it for this tutorial. So we actually created some different types of corners. We now can change with the switch node that we have here between valves and corner pieces. Could even set 2 valves. And when we go out, we have our multiparm here, where we can decide on our amount of valves. And that's it for now. So don't forget to save our node type and then save the file. Thanks again for watching. For now, this was Dokai. Bye bye.